we're
Okay, yeah.
okay. Yes, we're live on YouTube now.
Okay, then. Welcome everyone then to the GBS Lab Scrutiny meeting. We're a little late in starting, but we've got everybody here now and we're quorate, so we'll go to apologies for absence.
Madam Chairman, apologies have been received from Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody know of anybody? Okay then. Declarations of interest. No, no. Have we had any questions or deputations?
Madam Chairman, there are no questions or deputations.
Okay, then we can proceed with the minutes of this meeting, which is pages 5 to 12. Post.
I'm happy to move those, Madam Chair.
Second, Madam Chair.
I'm losing people's faces.
It was Councillor People who moved the minutes.
Madam Chairman, can you hear me? It's Councillor Marcus Haar.
Hello, Marcus. Yes, I heard you just then. Have you a question?
Yeah, just to say, I'm down as an apology, but I did join the whole meeting by the phone, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Then we'll correct those minutes.
Yeah, apologies, Councillor Hart. That's my mistake. So apologies. I'll amend the minutes and record that correctly.
Thank you.
Apologies for me too, Marcus. I was on the phone as well, so I wasn't aware that you were on the phone on the other line. So that's why I moved them as correct.
No, not at all. Don't worry.
Okay, then. So
thank you.
We've had a proposal from Councillor People to pass the minutes. Is anyone going to second it?
I thought I already had, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
my chalk.
So we've passed the minutes then. I can't see people's faces. I can only see Councillor Seymour Smith and Councillor Hodgson at the moment, so forgive me. Oh, Councillor Cox I can see now. Can we move to route to recovery then? So can we have that presentation, please? I'm very sorry, I can't see the presentation on my screen.
That's fine. I'm here, Chair, so I'll kick off. That's okay. So the report that you've had in front of you presents an update on developments since the last time I reported on the route to recovery to this committee, which was back in July. So there's a particular focus on the economic context that we find ourselves in at the moment, the evaluation of the first phase of our Step Forward campaign, our plans for a second phase, and our work on sector plans and the business engagement that underpins them. So I'll take the report as read, but I thought it might be useful if I just highlight a few key points and particularly some updates that have happened since the report was drafted and circulated to you. So firstly, I think it's worth noting, although we'll all be aware, we're working in a very fluid environment at the moment where things are changing on a daily and sometimes it feels like an hourly basis. So since the report was issued, there have been new national restrictions that have been announced. There's obviously the speech from the Prime Minister and then the Chancellor's statement yesterday as well. And then locally, we've had Wolverhampton joining Birmingham, Solihull and Sandwell in having some specific local restrictions too, given the number of coronavirus cases that they're experiencing. So clearly this is kind of a very fluid environment in which we're working. So I think it's really important for the LEP to continue to reflect on the impacts of COVID and all these new announcements on our key sectors and do what we can to support businesses as best as possible through those. It's also really important for the LEP to support the communication of key messages that have come out and try to reduce a bit of the complexity that sometimes comes forward, and particular to work with our partners and specifically our local authorities on getting out real sort of specific messages to businesses in the local area too. I think it's also worth just highlighting the latest KPI data that the report mentions, which continues to present a very sobering picture, really. So as you'll have picked up, unemployment is increasing, and the indications are that employers are planning on reducing jobs further in the autumn. As an area, we've seen a rising number of staff being furloughed, and that's a scheme that we all know will be finishing at the end of October. The Chancellor did announce yesterday a new job scheme that will be starting at the beginning of November. So hopefully some of those people who have been furloughed will now be retained in those jobs. But we are still expecting a number of job losses, particularly where there just isn't sufficient work for those individuals to be working a third of what would have been their normal hours. West Midlands Purchasing and Managers Index, which the report talks about, has improved since the low that we saw back in April, May, but has plateaued over the summer. So we're not seeing a continuous rise on that. And then also export data shows quite a significant fall as well. And we've started working with partners just to do some analysis of the combined impacts of both COVID and the end of EU transition, which we'll see at the end of the calendar year 2. And actually, you can see there is a significant risk for some of our key sectors around both of those big events coming together, not least business, financial, professional services and advanced manufacturing. So I think that's something that the LEP will need to look at a lot more over the coming weeks and months, not just sort of looking at things through a COVID lens, but also recognising the impact of Brexit as well. So the report outlines the headline evaluation from phase 1 of the Step Forward campaign, which we talked about in some detail at the last committee meeting. And it also particularly draws out the areas where things went well, and also those where we've had learning that we can pick up for this time round. A key programme within the phase 1 of Step Forward was the Pivot and Prosper grant programme. So this was our £2 million grant scheme, which was designed to support businesses who wanted to change their business model to be able to respond to the current set of circumstances. We've initially approved 44 applications for funding from that money, and we're going through the process now of signing those grant agreements with the businesses. Not all of that £2 million was allocated to those 44 businesses. So we have gone back to those businesses who applied, but their applications weren't quite good enough to reach the bar to begin with, to ask them to revisit those applications and resubmit, of which a number of them have done. So we are now looking to get approvals for 9 further proposals that have come through from businesses. So that should take us quite close to that £2 million mark. And there's some really exciting projects within the mix as well. So I think we've been really impressed by the innovation that's been shown by businesses, but also the amount of jobs that can be safeguarded and also created on the back of a relatively small amount of public funding. And that's showing to us at this early stage that it looks like the scheme is hopefully going to prove very good value for money, and certainly one that we would like to see progress and continue if we're able to secure more resources for it. So on the back of learning of the phase 1 of Step Forward campaign and looking at the analysis of the economy as it currently is and the sorts of needs that businesses have at the moment, we've developed phase 2 of Step Forward. And you can see within the report, there's an outline of the interventions we're proposing around the 3 themes of business, people and place. And the report also outlines the sort of outputs we're looking to achieve through them, and also how much intervention and money will be required from the LEP to take those specific ones forward. And I'm very happy to take questions on any of those, but the one I just wanted to draw to your attention is the SME Restart Scheme, and that's because we're actually launching it on Monday. So I thought it'd be very helpful just to particularly bring that to mind for yourselves. So this is an ERDF grant funding scheme. So we've received nearly £1 million from government for it to the Growth Hub. And it's all about trying to support businesses with relatively small levels of grants, usually around £3,000, to help those businesses procure support from professional services, or also potentially equipment as well to help them adapt to the current situation. So, as I said, we're looking to launch this on Monday. We think we've got funding for roughly around 300 businesses that we can try to support, which we have a feeling will be easily met, given that we've already had over 1,200 expressions of interest in from businesses. And that's without us doing any communications. That's been on the back of the government announcement earlier this summer. So to help us prioritise, we've set some fairly specific criteria around the sorts of businesses we're going to look to try to support through that process. We've been working very closely with local authorities and also business representative organisations to use your channels to try to get the messages out to business next week. And we'll also be talking putting a lot of information out through our social media channels as well. And any support you can give to that and promoting it to business groups in your areas or through your own social media will be greatly appreciated too. We very much recognise, as I've mentioned, that their need is likely to outstrip the amount of money that we've got here. So unfortunately, a number of businesses will be disappointed. But what we're really hoping is by them engaging with us and coming forward with expressions of interest, we'll actually be able to help support them through the Growth Hub and actually point them to probably hopefully signpost them to other support that might be available. And then that's been a really important thing throughout all of the Step Forward campaign, that even where businesses haven't been eligible for the sorts of interventions that we've got, we've been able to provide further support and help along the way for them. And I think that's incredibly important in terms of building up our relationship with a broader set of business base. We're also hopeful that if we are able to show a huge amount of demand for this money, that we will be able to make the case to government that more resource is needed. And I'm sure that's going to be the situation not just here, but in other parts of the country as well. So for other amounts of ERDF that are still left to be allocated, there could be a potential call for some of that to come down to local areas again too. So I'll pause there if that's okay, Chair, and very happy to take any questions on the rest of the report, because I'm conscious I've just mentioned a few of the key points within it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's no doubt of the will of GBS to try and help where it can. As you say, there may not be enough money to go around, but there's no doubt in the effort that you've put in over the past few months, and I think that's to be congratulated by all. I think the only question I would ask at this stage is, you said that you weren't able to reach perhaps some of the more rural areas. I'm thinking of Burton in particular. Can you tell me how many businesses have benefited that are not in Birmingham and Solihull across the patch?
I can get that information whilst we're kind of going through the conversation. I don't have it to hand, but it is on my computer, so I can have a look at that whilst we speak. But certainly when we've actually looked at the percentage of the business base in particular areas and the percentage of businesses who have applied to the Step Forward campaign, it's fairly comparable. So whilst there was, the lion's share of businesses were from the Birmingham area, we did have quite a lot of strong interest through from districts and from Solihull as well. So I'll just have a look for the stats whilst we're carrying on the conversation, if that's okay, and then we can certainly share the detail with you as well post this meeting.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll open it out to questions. I'm afraid I can't see anybody at the moment.
Question, please, Madam Chair.
Who am I speaking to? Is that Councillor Cox?
So, Madam Chair,
it was Councillor Chalk, and if I can follow him, that's Councillor People.
So, sorry, members, if you could just stop proceedings for a moment. Madam Chairman, if you look to the top right of your screen, there should be an icon which will show grid pattern, which should enable you to see everybody on the call.
Yeah, I've got the grid up. It's just I've just got people's initials. I can't see anybody's video except Councillor Hodgson.
Yeah, well, Madam Chairman,
with my broadband.
Yeah, going forward, I'll advise you which members are indicating to speak. That will probably be the easiest. Thank you. There's Councillor Chalk, Madam Chairman. Okay, Councillor Chalk, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chalk. Just a quick question to Katie, if I may. I'm not a business person. My field was education. If I find a small business in my area, how do they get into contact with you for this stuff, this money that's available as of from Monday? How do they contact you?
So that would be via our Growth Hub. So in terms of the ERDF grant that's coming out on Monday, there will be, we're given the volumes that we're expecting, it will be an online expression of interest form. So I will make sure the details are sent through to you on Monday, so you have all of that. So there'll be a specific route in for that particular grant scheme. And then I'll also make sure you get the wider Growth Hub details as well. So there's both the online, the website, the Growth Hub, where there is a huge amount of information there. There's also obviously the facility to call up and speak to advisors as well. So one of the things that we have been doing over the last few weeks is augmenting the team that we have within the Growth Hub. So that's been made possible through European funding and through additional money from government. so that we now have a greater number of business advisors, and really importantly, we have a number of account managers. So some of those have a broad brief, so they're around growth and resilience, so they can help with a huge amount of inquiries in detail with businesses. But we also now have particular sectoral leads as well. So for example, if you're a low carbon business, or you're one from advanced manufacturing or health technologies, there'll be someone there who will be able to give you specific bespoke sectoral support. And some of those individuals are employed by the Growth Hub and based there. Others are within our partner organisations where we feel they have makes much more sense for them to be with that organisation that fully understands that particular sector, but they're very much part of the Growth Hub family. So that will be the routes through to get information.
Madam Chair, can I just check whether Katie does have my council email address?
Perhaps if Paul could send around all the details of committee members, then I can get all that information to you.
I'll do so. Thank you, Katie.
Okay, who's next? I've got Councillor Seymour Smith on chat.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And hi, everybody. It's great to. Thanks, Katie, for that presentation. You've started to answer a couple of the points I was going to raise. Which was around any plans for any funding gaps that arise from the money that you've had from the ERDF post Brexit, if there's a no Brexit deal. What plans do you have in place? I appreciate that you've already started to use the funds that are coming and it's launching, but are you having any guidance from government, or is that funding guaranteed, etc.? Because obviously the COVID situation is going to continue for quite a while, and there'll probably be a renewed need again in a few months for more funding as well. Thank you.
I'm sure there will be. So I mean, this particular fund is funded through ERDF. So at the moment, certainly our GBS LEP allocation of ERDF has been fully allocated. So, but there is some money that still hasn't been given out that is held at a national level. So that's how government has been able to allocate some funding down to growth hubs to support with this particular SME sort of small grants scheme. But as I said, it's very welcome money, but I think will be a drop in the ocean compared with the amount of likely need here. So there is potential for some more ERDF, I would hope. But I think, for us, what is really important is understanding what the longer term picture is in terms of funding. So at this stage, we're not aware of what is likely to replace the European funding, or indeed what has been local growth funding monies as well. This is, it has been termed as UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and I know that's kind of still the term that's being talked about at the moment. And we had anticipated that getting more detail about that through the comprehensive spending review, but at this stage we're not quite sure when that CSR will land, apart from there's still clearly plans for it to happen before Christmas, and we're not sure what sort of quantum of funding it might come through and what that might end up looking like. But certainly the announcement this week that the Chancellor wasn't planning on giving a budget now prior to does kind of raise the question of what a multi-year settlement might look like through CSR.
Okay, thank you. Councillor People.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just first of all say that the last meeting I raised with you, Katie, the fact that authorities are also employers, and sadly that we might be losing people. I couldn't say more than that at the time, but in fact we as a district council, the controlling group, have begun to make redundancies, and the latest estimate is that we will have an 8 million deficit over 5 years. Now, for people like Lucy, that'll sound like almost nothing because of the scale of the budgets in Birmingham, but that compares with us having a normal disposable budget of around 9 million a year. So at the moment, the non-essential, non-statutory services seem to be the focus. And I'm concerned that what will happen is a lot of people in heritage and leisure related areas will lose their jobs at a time when lots of other people will also be losing their jobs in those areas. So getting new jobs won't be easy. So that is already happening now and is public now. So I'll just urge you to keep a listening ear on that one. With regard to the advanced manufacturing and the exports that you mentioned in the report, I'm sure you're talking to the chief execs. The people I meet walking the dog are usually at the other end of the scale. But for example, one person who works for Jaguar was saying that they're currently just painting the building, that the electric car has not been put into their plant, whereas it has at the Land Rover site. So, you know, the assumption is Land Rover is getting investment, but Jaguar, they're just not sure. And obviously, from an export point of view, that would be a double hit because so much of their stuff goes abroad. So those were 2 points. But in terms of your report, which as usual is really detailed and very helpful, I was interested in the ratio you mentioned between the amount of grant and the total cost, which would appear to be what government will come back to you as, if you like, a comparative measure. You know, if you're delivering out of £2 million, X amount goes in grant and the rest is in the costs of delivering the scheme, I presume they'll look at you as a LEP versus other LEPs. Do you know how we're doing versus them? Are we in a good position to show the money coming to you is actually being better spent or more efficiently spent?
So it's difficult to do a comparison with other LEPs on this because most LEPs have not delivered a scheme quite in the way that we have been doing here. So as GBS LEP, as you'll be aware, we've benefited from the business rates pool. So that's been given us over the last few years in particular a significant amount of additional revenue funding that we've been able to use to support interventions. So a lot of that in the past has been used to support towns and local centres, for example, our work on sectors and skills. But what we've done because of the COVID crisis is divert some of that funding for specific interventions to try to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19. So most other LEPs haven't had that sort of revenue funding that they've been able to use. And for those that have done a similar grant scheme, that has tended to be from growing places funding that they might not have spent in other ways, and like that sort of like. So, and a lot of them have been very much more about getting grant schemes out the door quickly when lockdown hit, as opposed to ours, which was very much around, as the name suggests, helping businesses not just to survive in the very short term, but to really adapt their business model so they're able to hopefully prosper in the longer term. So they're kind of probably not comparable in that sense. Having said that, what we have done is compared the outputs that we think we'll achieve through Pivot and Prosper with what would be the usual benchmark for ERDF, and it's coming out very strongly in comparison to that. So I think I'm very hopeful we'll make a good case, but we'll need to be lobbying government for more funding because unfortunately we don't have sufficient within the business rates pool to be able to do a further extension. But clearly we'd like to, because although it's been great to support over just over 50 businesses, as I said, that is a minute sort of number compared with the total business base that we've got here.
Yeah, as we said last time, it's a really good scheme. It was just very interesting to see how you'd broken it down as to how it was working. So thank you for that, and keep going. Thank you.
And that's just, I think, if you're happy just to mention the advanced manufacturing piece that you talked about.
Oh, sorry,
that's
yes.
actually a really good example of where we've come together as a region. So through the mayor and the combined authority and a lot of work that's been led by Coventry and Warwickshire LEP in particular across the 3 LEPs, there's been a kind of an automotive task force that's been looking very much at the support the sector requires. And I know the mayor and others have then been lobbying very hard with ministers around the interventions that are needed, because I think we all recognise we're at a really critical point with the automotive and the aerospace sector, given the impact they've had and the sort of perfect storm with a lot of things all coming together at one time. And we need to. It's really important that we collectively come together to try to support them.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Is there anybody else who wants to speak? I've got nobody.
Councillor Hodgson.
Chair, Councillor Hodgson is indicating.
Yes, please, Councillor Hodgson.
Yeah, it's a question relating to the funding and what it covers, actually. The emphasis has been on remote working, and I just wonder whether the funding that's being provided addresses capacity issues, particularly for small business, well, any business actually. I know when we started working remotely from the council, we had network capacity issues that were addressed internally, but some businesses may or may not be able to deal with that as an issue, but so does funding cover that point?
So not specifically, no, in terms of the sort of infrastructure required for the businesses, but what we have been looking at is particular interventions to support with the likes of greater digital adoption by businesses, digital skills, and support with things like marketing, online marketing, and other things that businesses may have not had to think about before in the same way. So although we've not provided the specific point that you're talking about, what we have done is hopefully raise the skills levels of those businesses who've been involved, so that they're much better able to adapt to the sort of online nature of activity now.
So that's not been highlighted as a concern then at the moment?
Well, it's not been something that we've looked to fund ourselves, I think, through that. So, I mean, I don't know, Shanaz, if there's anything just to sort of put you in the spot and bring you in, because I know you've been leading on the towns and local centres and work for us, and perhaps there's other things in terms of the retail support that might be worth just mentioning along those lines.
We certainly haven't received any feedback saying that people are struggling in terms of digital capacity, and we'll come on the next item to the support that we've been providing specifically around additional skills. But we also have weekly, or have had since March, weekly meetings with local authorities, and none of the officers have raised any particular issues that they're receiving feedback in terms of infrastructure capacity. But I think there are other government funding streams, I think through potentially DCMS, that look at infrastructure and providing businesses with support and vouchers for connectivity and increasing their capacity.
Okay, are you okay with that then, Councillor Hodgson?
You're on mute, Councillor Hodgson.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think I understand the situation better, thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else who wants to ask?
Councillor Cox, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Cox, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I really, I mean, the report that we've received is very detailed and very good. I wanted really to support your initial opening comment regarding the applicants and how it works, you know, within the rural communities of the LEP. And I'm pleased that we may receive then a bit more of a detail, because obviously if there is a lack of applicants coming from parts of Staffordshire that we represent, Chairman, then obviously it's we need to raise our game in one respect to obviously encourage applicants to be looking at the Growth Hub, etc., in terms of our own publications and so forth. So I do support that, and I do certainly think that you know, sharing it as quickly and possibly through social media would be a good way of doing it. I mean, there's many formats now that the list is ever growing, and I know the Lichfield District Council do certainly use Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, so forth. So it's all very good, but it would be good to know the detail. Whether we need to be, as local authorities ourselves, raising our game if people are missing out on the possibilities. So it was really just to add my support to Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anybody
just
else?
on the...
Yeah, did you want to come back, Katie? Sorry.
Yeah, I've got the figures in front of me now, so I can mention them if that would be useful. And then clearly we can follow up more detail afterwards if you would like me to do that as well. So I think to say is first off, any additional support that you can give in terms of getting messages out will be gratefully received, because I said, although the reach has improved and particularly improved towards the back end of the campaign, because we were doing much more targeted communications in particular areas, that I'm very conscious there's much more that we need to be doing as well. So I think just so to your offer of support, Councillor Cox, yes please, and absolutely. So I think, you know, certainly one of the things that we'll be doing on Monday with the launch of the ERDF grant scheme will be, you know, copying all the local authorities into our social media on that, so that it's very easy then to retweet and get the message out there. So I think if you can keep an eye on those sort of messages coming through and do what you can, that would be fantastic. So in terms of the companies that came forward through the Step Forward campaign onto the various different interventions, there's about 400 in total. So as I said, the majority of those, 239 were from Birmingham. Lichfield did very well, did well in comparison with the other districts. So 20 different companies joined up into various interventions that we had through that. And actually, in terms of the other end of the district scale, it was Wyre Forest with 9. So there was clearly kind of more to be doing on that point. And East Staffordshire was 16. So, Chair, that's kind of where the number of businesses were from your patches. So we'd obviously want to be seeing more than that come through. So as I said, that would be great. You know, any information you can get would be gratefully received on that basis. However, I said what we did have a look at then is in terms of the percentage of enterprises in each of the different parts of the LEP area and the percentage of Step Forward take up. And actually it was, you could see, depending on the figures I've talked about, show huge stark difference between Birmingham and some of the districts. But actually, when you start to look at the percentage of enterprises in your area, it does sort of even itself out, and you can see that there is comparability between those two.
Okay, thank you very much. Any final questions, Katie?
Sorry, Madam Chairman, through you. Katie, apologies, I phased out there. Could you repeat the figure for Lichfield, please, for the... I'm
happy to share you if it's easier, I'll put together a note with the two different tables. Fantastic. So that you could have a look at that, which is probably easier than trying to work out from the different figures.
Thank you.
Chair, I had requested through the chat to speak. It's Councillor People.
Okay, I thought you'd been once, Councillor People, but go again.
Well, you can shut me down if you wish, Chair. What I was going to ask, Katie, was I noticed Tamworth wasn't mentioned, so I don't know whether anyone applied from Tamworth. But the other thing,
I just didn't mention it.
No, that's fine. I mean, you know, I'll just carry back the story. No, more importantly, what I wanted to ask you was
from your area.
12. That's great. Thank you. As long as we're ahead of Lichfield. What I wanted to ask particularly
You're behind, unfortunately, quite significantly behind.
Now that'll please Richard. What I wanted to particularly check with you is that when we had the capital funding grant, it could only go to the metropolitan authorities. I'm assuming from all you've said that all businesses in all our district areas are able to apply for this funding.
That is absolutely correct. So the Step Forward campaign will be available across the whole GBS LEP geography. In terms of this particular ERDF grant scheme, each growth hub in each LEP will be running one. So actually businesses in your areas would also have a grant scheme, ERDF grant scheme to go through the Worcestershire growth hub or the Stoke and Staffordshire one. But clearly it's really important that one business cannot access money from both both LEP schemes. So we're working closely with our counterparts to ensure that there isn't a business doesn't try to get funding twice.
I'm quite happy they can only can't get it twice. But I wanted to make sure we were eligible because when we went through the capital scheme, our schemes for Stoke and Staff's LEP basically got no real consideration at all. So we ended up empty-handed. So I wanted to make sure we targeted the right place. Thank you very much.
So just one more point to add on that, which I think is an important one, that although each growth hub has got this funding from government for the ERDF scheme, it's up to particular LEPs to determine what the criteria are for those.
Okay.
So certainly we've gone for a fairly prescriptive set of criteria based around our key sectors. The number of employees within the business is between 5 and 9. So we're quite targeted. Worcestershire and Stoke and Staffordshire may have gone for a slightly different set of criteria. So actually for businesses in those overlap areas, if they don't qualify for GBS LEP, I would suggest they have a talk with their with the kind of county LEP growth hubs as well, because it may be that they can receive funding through that route if they cannot through us.
I shall add that to my point when I send it out to people that if not, look elsewhere because That's lovely. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you. So, and anybody else? Paul Rogers, can you see if there's anybody else who wants to speak?
Nobody's indicating, Madam Chairman. No members have indicated.
Okay, then. Well, it just remains for me to thank Katie very much for a very comprehensive report, as usual. What we're asked to do as far as recommendations are concerned are just note and comment, which I think we've done. So we can move to the next item, which is the place delivery plan update, which is page 27 on your pack, and it's Shanaz Carroll. So I can't see you, Shanaz, but I'm sure you'll make a very good presentation. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you for having me. It's the first time I've attended one of these meetings. So I provided the report, but I will run through it quickly just in terms of some additional information. So the place delivery plan we've been working on, which was approved in January 2019. The first intervention in that report is the Strategic Employment Sites Study, which is a study that was undertaken across the 3 LEP geography. It was started in November 2018. It's been a long time coming, and we've just recently received the latest final draft report. That's been shared with the planning subgroup, and officers have been invited to send any comments or observations through to the LEP executive on the place team, as we have a client meeting at the start of October, where we'll be considering those comments that we receive and also what next steps to take in terms of publication and the recommendations that are coming out of that. We launched the Town and Local Centres Plan in February of last year, and have been continuing to implement the recommendations for that. So we have had 2 calls through our TLC funding pot since July 2019, and we've awarded 12 projects with just under £600,000 to a variety of areas for a variety of projects. I have provided details of where the locations that funding has gone to, and it includes Uttoxeter, Bromsgrove, Redditch, Kidderminster, etc. And the projects range from a local growth strategy and action plan in Shirley and Solihull to a connectivity and highways study in the Soho Road area. So quite a broad range of projects that have come through and that we funded. So we do continue working with those areas in terms of providing whatever support is needed. There's a couple that are coming to an end now, so we're in discussions about how those areas take those plans forward. So for instance, in Shirley, they received the first tranche of money to develop the plan. Colleagues are about to sign that off, and then the next stage is the implementation plan of that. So we're in discussions with the team at Solihull about that. We're also hoping to launch another funding call very shortly in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be inviting colleagues to submit expressions of interest further projects. What we're hoping to do this time is join together another pot, a very small pot around culture and heritage, so that we really try and join up the place agenda and get people to think in a very holistic way around what they might do in terms of place. We said we would conduct a piece of research looking at the ecosystem of towns and local centres, and that's now been completed. It was launched in April of this year. And I've provided the link for that. If you do go on the website and have a look, you'll also see that there is an evidence pack for each location. We really got under the skin in this piece of research, and the team that we appointed did stakeholder sessions in each of the 10 locations so that they could get feedback about what local people felt were the opportunities and assets in each of the locations, and then drew that together, identifying future potential opportunities for investment in those 10 locations. The housing framework, we're currently reviewing where we are with that at the moment, given the changes in terms of COVID-19 and what the implications for the housing market is going to be with regard to our framework. We're also having conversations with the Combined Authority around the work that they're doing, and also in terms of colleagues' skills and the green agenda as well, to see how we might be able to play that into any work that we take forward. We also said that we would do work around culture, and colleagues did a great job in terms of pulling together the Culture Investment Framework, which was published in December of last year. We've also launched a small capacity building fund, which we were able to fund 9 grants across various locations, small amounts, but really to look at how they build capacity within the organisations and potentially produce a pipeline of projects as well. Katie already referred to the work that we've done in terms of COVID-19 and responding to that. And I made reference to calls that we've had with local authorities and other stakeholders. So at the start of lockdown in March, we offered the opportunity to each of the local authorities and business improvement districts and other stakeholders to work with us on a weekly call where we could offer support and provide some guidance and hopefully communicate some of the things that were coming out of government in terms of guidance. We had a really good take up, and officers felt that the calls were really, really useful. It's been an opportunity for them to also share best practice across the patch and learn from each other. So when things like the Reopening High Streets Fund was announced earlier in the summer, colleagues really learnt from each other about how they could use that funding and the different types of things that they could implement and the different projects that they could do to support businesses reopening. In terms of the specific projects that we provided support and funding to, the first one was Click and Drop, which was essentially a digital platform called ShopHappy. They usually operate as a click and collect service, which drives footfall in town centres. They flipped their business model and provided a coordinated delivery service from a range of businesses located in a town centre. So it meant consumers didn't get 6 deliveries a day, and that businesses could coordinate a single delivery. We have provided funding for up to 10 locations for a period of 6 months at no cost to business to join the platform, set up their location-specific pages, upload their products. We've actually now had 11 towns, despite the fact they're saying we were supporting 10, who wanted to get involved in the project, and I've detailed those in that report. We're still working really hard to get those locations and those businesses onto the platform. And last night, ShopHappy sent out a message to all the locations involved and the officers that are leading to encourage them to get their businesses online. We're offering some webinar sessions for businesses in the evening so that we can go through again with them how they actually get themselves registered on the platform and get their products on there. So that's some additional support just to really reinforce the need, especially with additional restrictions coming in, of how important it is that businesses remain open and are able to respond in whatever way they need to in terms of how COVID and potentially the spread is moving forward. Katie referred to our digital skills. We've provided digital skills training to high street, small and micro businesses in town centres. That took the form of a series of 3 webinars. The average take-up of each webinar was around 45 businesses, and that was followed up with one-to-one support for individual businesses. So they'd have an hour session with the trainer to go through exactly where they were in terms of using social media and digital platforms. And then they got sent a workbook, they got given homework, and then that was the hour-long session with the business to make sure they understood and that they were implementing some of the actions that they've discussed. The third one that we provided was again a series of webinars focusing on reopening for businesses, again high street businesses, independent retailers. These programs weren't targeted at the nationals because we felt that they potentially had the resource to be able to do things for themselves. Sadly, take-up was quite low on this, whether it was just in terms of timing, that businesses were kind of busily thinking about how they were going to reopen. It didn't feel they needed additional support. So what we did when we saw that the numbers were quite low was actually offer to all the local authorities, and that was via our weekly calls, was place-specific sessions. So the areas that took us up on that were Shirley, Lichfield and Tamworth, and we have another session planned in for Sutton Coldfield. And they were really well received. We probably had about 8 to 10 businesses from each location participate in those sessions, but the feedback has been really, really positive, with some areas asking if we can run those again. So we're looking at what potential additional support we might need moving forward. The hospitality sector, as we know, was very badly affected in terms of the shutdown. So when they were given the opportunity to reopen, we held one webinar for town centre managers or licensing officers on how they could support those businesses to open, as well as one directly for local businesses. Take up was quite mixed on that. We probably had only about 10 businesses attend the session. And I think, again, that's potentially down to communication. So as we move forward and provide any additional support, your offers of helping us to get the message out would be really well received. We have, as I mentioned, we were having weekly calls. Once the Reopening High Streets Fund came out, we felt that officers would be too busy to attend a weekly, so we moved them to fortnightly. But what our plan is moving forward for the next couple of months until Christmas is to have those calls monthly so that we can stay in touch with people. Of course, the door is always open as far as the place team is concerned to have those conversations. And in between times, we do send out other relevant information. So I'm about to send out information to that network on the Restart programme that Katie's mentioned already. In terms of looking forward, a couple of projects that we're currently working up. We had planned to do a workspace study previously, and this was really confined to looking at co-working space, incubation, etc. for smaller businesses. As a result of changing working practices, as a result of COVID and intelligence that we're picking up from lots of partners in the property market, we're currently reviewing that brief at the moment and discussing it internally with other teams. And that's really so that we can look at what future requirements for office accommodation will be. And that's not just across our smaller locations, but including the city and larger towns as well. We're hoping that we'll be able to look at what the future office requirement is, as well as what the potential is to create maybe office hubs where people are remaining working from home but still need that interaction where they can potentially drop in. Once we've developed the brief internally, we will share that with our local authority partners so that they can input to that, because I've already had a couple of people saying we'd really like to do a property study and can we apply for the TLC funding for it. So I've kind of said to them at the moment, we're looking at doing a wider GBS LET study. So we will involve them in those discussions as well to ensure that their ambitions are covered off in that tender brief, which we're hoping to launch, put out to market next month. The other project that we're working up at the moment is whole place zones. And essentially, whole place is really an approach that coordinates the LEP interventions and focuses on the economic growth aspect, but really pulling in across the LEP all the different interventions. So from our skills team, our business and innovation team, and seeing how we can add value to that agenda. We're currently at the stage where we have drawn up a list of criteria and associated data that goes with that. So over the next month or so, we'll be doing further work looking at the data to identify a potential pilot area that we could then select via our mainlet board. We are again having conversations with our local authority partners with regard to this, because obviously whichever area we choose, the local authorities' participation will be key to that. The idea is that we also then have discussions with other partners and agencies who may be able to bring some of their budgets so that we can look at pooling budgets and resources to take some of the interventions forward. But this is really about how we can add value, not duplicate, but add value across the LEP by coordination or better coordination of our interventions, additional resources. We're also currently looking at developing a crowdfunding platform across the GBS LEP area. And again, this has been flagged with our local authority network group and wider stakeholders. We've looked at what other areas are doing across the UK. The GLA, the London Mayor, launched a crowdfunding platform about 4 years ago. Warwickshire have also run a crowdfunding platform, so we've been having conversations with those areas who have already got schemes up and running to learn from them and just ensure that we don't repeat any mistakes that they've made previously. So at the moment we're scoping out the objectives and the criteria for the projects that may come forward, and we'll be looking for that and hopefully have that up and running in the next couple of months as well. I'm aware that BCC are also potentially looking at a crowdfunding opportunity, so we are having conversations to make sure that there's no overlap as far as that is concerned as well. I think I'll stop there if that's okay, Chair, and happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Thank you very much, Naz. That was really comprehensive. It's amazing to see what work's been going on, even though this time, there's a lot of people being furloughed. Clearly, you've been very busy. Has anybody got any questions at the moment?
Councillor People, Madam Chairman.
Councillor People, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to echo that point about how useful it's been, we had a health and wellbeing scrutiny meeting last night, and part of that included a report on the use made of the European funding to allow us to get our high street open with COVID marshals and so on. And the two members from my side who were there reported back very favourably on all that had been done. So thank you to Shazeen and the team for making that possible. One quick point about your business office demand survey. You might want to have a chat with Matt Fletcher at our authority, as we're finding increased demand for our business enterprise building, because small businesses are working from home but do want the opportunity to have the conference room. So we're seeing more demand for the little units that we've got available. So I just thought I'd let you know that as a little straw in the wind of what you might find.
That's lovely,
thank you. We're really grateful for the support we've had. Really grateful. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Anybody else? No. I just had a question about the general structure going forward. We're in East Staffordshire putting in for the Stronger Towns Fund and looking at how to regenerate the town centre. But we're also a commuter town, and the types of housing we're building, a lot of them tend to be for the commuters going into Derby and Birmingham and Leicester and places like that. I just wonder if you'd like to comment, given the kind of work you're doing, how you see the future of work and how that will impact on things like small towns and the housing that they build.
Certainly, Chair. I think some of the in conversations we're having at the moment are that requirements in terms of size of property will need to change. So where people might be working from their bedroom at the moment, if working from home continues, then those requirements for space at home will increase, I think. And whilst we might not end up working from home all the time, I think that a lot of companies are looking at potentially only returning to the office maybe 2 or 3 days a week, and then allowing much more flexibility in terms of how their employees work. So I think that will definitely have an impact in terms of future housing requirements.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to ask a question? No? Well, thank you very much, Shanazza. We'd love you to come back again at some point, I think, but we'll wait to see how our structure develops over the next few months.
Thank you, Chair.
We're asked to consider the report, and I think we've done that. So thank you very much. And we'll move on to the work programme, which is on pages 31 to 40. If people got that in front of them. I'll hand over to Paul Rogers just a minute, just to outline where we're heading with this and what December's programme is and what's still outstanding.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, just to draw members' attention to the work programme as it stands. After today, there are 2 meetings left in this municipal year, and that will actually, when we get through to March of next year, will conclude the forward programme for the last 3 years. Some members may recall that we kind of reset the work programming for this Joint Scrutiny Committee 3 years ago. We went forward with a 3-year programme, and each year had a theme. So we looked at policy, review of policy, and then the impact of the policy and the outcomes arising. So there is space, as you can see, really, and there is some capacity on the work programme going forwards in March, more so than the meeting in December of 2020. Members may wish to start to consider items for a new cycle, a new annual work programme for 2021-22, or whether they wish to continue with a look ahead that goes beyond 12 months, and it could be 24 or 36 months. But any comments will obviously be gratefully received through the Madam Chairman, and I'll action anything members request. Thank you.
Okay. I'm just looking ahead at December, and it does say the devolution and recovery white paper. I'm not sure we will be in a position to look at that in December. And if we're not, I'm wondering if we could bring forward the emerging and disruptive technologies delivery plan. Does Katie want to comment in this open section about that? You're on mute.
You'd think I'd have learned by now. In terms of the devolution and recovery white paper, that was due to be published by government towards the end of September, is what they'd originally said. Clearly, we're kind of passing that point now. They are, we're supposed to be thinking different things, but certainly the new minister, Luke Hall, has recently told a meeting of the M9 that the expectation is that white paper will be published this year. So I think the intention that they're working on is November time, but I believe there are different viewpoints coming through, and perhaps we'll pick that up later on in the agenda. So it may be that there is something to bring forward to this committee, but you're right, it might not be the case. I think perhaps what I would suggest we do is, if you're happy, I can speak to Paul about what best sectoral plans to bring forward, because as a LEP we're focusing on 5 sector plans on behalf of the West Midlands. I've noticed you've got business, financial, professional services on there for the December agenda. I would suggest we also broaden that out to cover modern services, which is a key part of the local industrial strategy. So we can look at that, but we have other sectoral plans that we might want to see how best we can bring those to the committee's attention as well, because I think it's helpful for you to see that the sector plans that we're going into a deep dive on, which emerging technologies is less so. To be honest, that's much more featuring across sectors as opposed to an individual one itself. You're on mute now.
Sorry. So thank you very much. So I'll talk with Paul and we'll redo the plan. Your advice. Has anybody else got anything that they really want to bring forward for December?
Katie.
Yeah, just said that we've also got on the forward plan an evaluation of the local growth fund. So whilst we're very happy to bring you the latest status where we are in December, obviously that fund is running until the end of March. So I think a full evaluation is probably we'll certainly be able to do at the start of next financial year. But clearly we can give you an update on where we are in terms of spend and outputs in December, but it won't be sort of a summary of where the full programme has got to its close, because there'll still be another quarter to run.
Okay then. Has anybody got any comments to make? No?
It's Councillor Marchall. Can I show my ignorance as being a sort of very much a backbencher councillor for Redditch, and what the situation is as regards the joint situation of Worcestershire LEP and the Greater Birmingham LEP, as to what the government's views are, or whether we're staying in the two, or whether we've got to choose one, and if we've got to choose one, have we got to go with our government area, our local government areas? What's the situation at the moment? So obviously, I say being completely backbencher, I've got limited knowledge.
Madam Chairman, just to advise, that item will be taken as a part 2 item, Councillor Chalk. That's coming up next.
Okay then. If no one else has got any comments, then that's the end of today's public meeting. So I'd like to exclude the press and the public, if that's okay.
Move that, Chair.
Okay.
There's council people.